Every day, it becomes more clear America is fracturing. And it's not just evident in our politics, but in our culture as well. We've sorted ourselves into two distinct nations that barely interact outside of conflict. This is what journalist Bill Bishop famously called the big sort. Because for decades, Americans have been clustering in communities of like-minded people. Liberals tend to flock in dense, prosperous cities, while conservatives dominate the vast suburban and rural landscapes. We watch different shows, and we believe fundamentally different truths. But this geological sorting didn't happen in a vacuum. It was a reaction to a cultural earthquake that began decades ago. In fact, when you look across the country, you'll notice it's not just red states and blue states, it's red counties and blue counties, often miles apart, but having little to do with each other. And a study from the Pew Research Center showed that since 1994, the number of Americans with consistently conservative or consistently liberal worldview has more than doubled. And as a result, our animosity for each other has just skyrocketed. And more recent data suggests that staggering majorities of both schools of thought have come to view the other side as not just wrong, but immoral. So when we don't share a neighborhood, don't discuss policies, politics, or culture at a workplace, or even perceive economic reality the same way, how could we possibly share a country? So that brings me back to my original question. How did we get here? You see, for a brief period after World War II, America had a rare moment of consolidation. A few national TV networks, a handful of industrial giants, and a shared sense of purpose all came together to create a common culture. But in my opinion, starting in the 60s, this started to unravel. As globalization, automation, and suburbanization came along, we started pulling apart. The mediating institutions which once bridged our differences, strong families, local churches, and the responsibility to our community, they all began to erode. And going into the 70s, the famous hippie era, many turned to drugs, free living, and promiscuity, as those who were disposed to living a life without rules had the rare opportunity to take the prosperity that the United States now had to offer, and was abundant, and in my opinion, squandered it. Now, I think this was largely a result of the United States having been at war for so long. Both world wars, the Korean War, immediately followed by the Vietnam War, and combined with what many saw as the rigidity of religion, it was the perfect time for experimentation, to test the boundaries and reject authority. And that became predominantly evident in the music we listened to and in the movies we watched. Our rejection of traditional ideas and principles or established ways of either acting or producing music was simply thrown out or seen as old and unnecessary. While I'm not necessarily a strong championer of all traditions, I still think this is where things start to really go awry. Because culturally, in direct reaction to this new wave of thinking, the right, and especially the religious right, decided they wanted nothing to do with this lifestyle and reflexively pulled away from everything that this rule-free mindset touched. But unfortunately for the right, what this touched was every aspect of our culture, from Hollywood and education to fashion and the media we consume. So what started off as an attempt to maintain some sense of order ended up being simply an abdication of the culture at large. And that brings me to the great accelerator, really taking off in the 90s and continuing till now, and that is technology. You've had the world wars, you've had the carefree spirit, globalization, automation, so let's throw technology into the mix with the age of information. The internet promised to connect everyone. What ended up actually happening is it has perfected the art of isolation. Cable news and social media taking our already existing differences and exacerbating them to so far unknown degree. Now, initially, the internet was built on close-knit communities, centralized around forums and chats of people who all tend to believe roughly the same thing, or at least bonded around similar interests. But because the internet at the time was so slow, it hadn't had the chance to live up to its full potential, because now instead of focusing on knitting groups and gaming communities, much of social media has now been centralized, and the algorithms running those social media are designed for one thing and one thing only: engagement. And what's more engaging than pure outrage? And with every click and share, we double down on our echo chambers and we forget that our fellow Americans are our neighbors too. So as a result, the two Americas have continued to drift further and further apart, maximizing their core and base values until they became almost unrecognizable from each other. On one side, you have the America which values success, and in a hyper-competitive world, virtues like self-reliance and entrepreneurial grit became paramount. That's how I believed in pulling oneself up by their bootstraps, and saw America as a land of opportunity where individual effort is everything. It celebrates the business owner and the innovator. But in an echo chamber, the weaknesses of this side are also magnified. That focus on individual success can actually result in leaving many people behind. Now, oftentimes people fall behind because of their own failures, and I absolutely acknowledge that. But many times, it's because of circumstances that are out of people's control entirely. While the right tends to give more in charity than the left, sometimes the right can, in fact, forget about their neighbor. And on the other side, you have an America that values what they consider empathy, because for the most part, they lived in dense, diverse, and prosperous urban centers. Their worldview championed collective well-being, social justice, and cultural expression. And in places where people from all over the globe congregate for business and leisure, it's kind of easy to see how people would have those ideals. Contrast to the right's need to have success, to build, and to create stable institutions. The left seeks innovation in art, culture, and social progress. But just like the right, when maximized in an echo chamber, it also has a weakness. The left tends to rely more on centralized government to express that empathy, and as a result, it weakens the local person-to-person bonds of family and community. There's less of a reliance on church or the idea of a God, and instead, government becomes God. Welfare becomes charity, and taxes become their tithe and duty. And when you take all that and filter it through social media, what the left considers to be empathy can actually just become performative, leading to deep misunderstandings for anyone who doesn't share that same moral framework. The right, spending their entire life giving to charity, tithing, helping the community, will look to someone on the left and say, that's not empathy. You're just giving money to the government. How is that helping anyone? And people on the left look at the right and see their desire not to pay taxes and their desire to keep their own money as selfish and rogue individuality. And when you have those two competing venues grow apart from each other, it doesn't make for a strong sense of community or a nation. But what does this division actually look like in the day-to-day? Well, I think it's obvious. The left sees compromise as impossible with people they think are morally reprehensible and beyond repair. And the right sees compromise as impossible, as they feel they've compromised for the last 50 years. So any more compromise is just an abdication of will entirely. So with such a harsh divide, it's going to be difficult to be able to come together again. In fact, it may simply be true that one will have to win over the other, just so we can have shared spaces and shared ideas once more. I mean, we can't agree on basic facts, whether it's about science, economics, or history. So what can we do about all this? In my opinion, we need transcendent shared values. The American dream of having 2 cars, a home, and a family was only possible while people remained moral and respectful of one another. So without the shared framework of what good even is supposed to mean, what else could possibly have been the outcome of consumerism and rapid advances in technology? One good step towards coming together may likely be just becoming exhausted with all the things we have and the constant polarization and seeking that connection with each other once again. Now, speaking of transcendent shared values and what the meaning of good even is, in the Bible there was a story, a concept even, that was important. So even if you don't believe in the Bible per se, bear with me. It went something like this, and tell me if it sounds familiar. In the Old Testament, it details how the nation of Israel would be delivered from oppression, live free and prosperous, and then at some point they would forget the God who delivered them, turn to idols, and do whatever pleased them. And then the passage would say something like, every man would do that which was right in his own eyes. What do you think is happening in America right now? If there's nothing binding us in this vast country, nothing saying what is right and wrong, apart from laws which, frankly, citizens can choose to ignore, people will just choose to do whatever they think will satisfy their own moral axioms. And no matter what people think of religion, this kind of disunity is not sustainable for a country. Some of those institutions and traditions, which much of America abandoned in the 60s and 70s, were actually a good thing. It created a structure of transcendent shared values that, even if the person across the street had complete opposite political views from you, you knew that they were going to act within a certain moral framework. You knew you could walk up to them, shake their hand, and agree on something. And it mattered, because they had the exact same belief set as you. Whether they were liberal or conservative, you knew that that man's word meant something. But the only reason why someone's word can mean something, the only way integrity could have any meaning, is if there's some kind of value system that is built on. And unfortunately, what's happening in our country is that without those transcendent shared values, we have millions of people, each with their own value system. That's not sustainable, that's not unifying, and it cannot continue for too much longer. Spend more time with your family and your community. Encourage others to respect your fellow citizens. And yes, go to church. Help build those shared transcendent values. You'll be doing your duty for the good of the country, and you might just like it. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. Are we destined for failure as a nation? Or is there a bright future restoration ahead for all of us? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you again next time. Bye!